I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Welcome to the Young Turks, live from the Polymarket Studios in LA. Cenk Ugrana Kasparian with you guys. We have the usual war, politics, Democrats, Republicans. Who is Kamala Harris gonna pick? We've got updates on that. I'm starting to develop favorites. We're gonna talk about at least one of them today. So lots of stories to get to, and JD Vance and his weirdness in a little bit as well. All right, Casper, what do we got?
We begin with some international news, some concerning international news at that, so let's take it away.
Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire since October 7, but it's feared this escalation could trigger all-out war. The US has called for restraint as Israel vows to retaliate, warning there will be a price to pay. But backed by Iran and with its massive arsenal of missiles, Hezbollah is a far more formidable foe than Hamas in Gaza.
A deadly rocket strike that is being blamed on Hezbollah has tragically killed 12 people in Israel's illegally annexed Golan Heights over the weekend, sparking worries that this escalation will drive to a broader regional war in the Middle East. We've been talking about the possibility of a broader regional war in the Middle East ever since Hamas attacked Israel. Israel retaliated by invading Gaza and killing tens of thousands of people. Now, the majority of the victims were in their teens and were playing soccer when this strike occurred. Here are more details about the aftermath of this deadly strike.
The children were playing soccer just behind me when the sirens went off. They then tried to rush to the shelter. You can see it's pockmarked with shrapnel, but there simply wasn't enough time before that rocket slammed into the pitch. And you see these charred children's bicycles left behind. These paramedics arrived 10 minutes later.
The whole scene was truly chaotic. People screaming, searching for their children.
We found only dead kids. It was really hard to watch. I've never seen kids like that. And I've seen dead bodies, but not like that.
Now, the victims of this strike were between the ages of 10 to 20 years old. And the specific neighborhood where the strike happened is known as the village of Majal Shams. Now, all of the victims were Druze. This is a minority within Israel. They are Muslim Arabs. And Hezbollah's chief spokesman, Mohammed Afif, told the Associated Press that they vehemently deny carrying out this attack. But National Security Council spokeswoman Adrian Watson said in a statement on Sunday, quote, "This attack was conducted by Lebanese Hezbollah. It was their rocket and launched from an area they control." However, a senior US official who spoke to the Washington Post on condition of anonymity says that the Biden administration believes that the attack was an accident by Hezbollah. Hezbollah says that they've been firing rockets at an Israeli army post in the Golan Heights in response to Israeli airstrikes on villages in southern Lebanon. And so I have some more details in a moment, but I'm really curious what you think about this because, it could have been an accident by Hezbollah. Hezbollah typically takes responsibility for the airstrikes that they conduct. And we know that ever since the beginning of this war, there's been, tit for tat retaliation happening in this area between Israel and Lebanon.
Yeah, tons of nuance here. So first of all, normally Hezbollah takes responsibility, except in this case, there's 12 children and teenagers dead, so they're less likely to take responsibility. I don't really trust the statements of Hezbollah or Israel or America. I just don't trust them at all. None of them have proved to be overly reliable, so it's very hard to tell what happened. Now, we do know the bigger picture for sure. So since the October 7th attacks, Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging missiles back and forth. And so, in these conflicts, they always try to find who started it, right? Okay, we can go 1,000 times over and over about who started it. There is no question about two things though. Number one, this entire conflict exists because of the illegal occupation that Israel has had of West Bank, Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights. There's no question that is the underlying cause of it. There's no second argument. The idea that it's, they don't mind the occupation, they just happen to hate Jews or something, is insanity. It's stupid. It's meant to shift the argument to charges of racism, anti-Semitism, etc., instead of the obvious underlying giant moral cancer sitting right there. You're occupying millions and millions of people for decade after decade. That's why they're not fans of yours, okay? So that's point one. Point two, in terms of what could make this particular round go away, is at least Hezbollah has been very clear about it. They don't want a broader war. There's no question about that. Now, Israel says they don't want a broader war, at least in the press today. But in the past, as in like a day before the bombing, Netanyahu had been pushing for a broader war over and over and over again. So one side definitely has pushed for a broader war here, and the other side has not. Now, that doesn't mean Hezbollah is innocent. They've been firing missiles the whole time, okay? So now, a slight good news for Israel on this front at least. They've killed a lot less civilians here, especially as a ratio to fighters, than they have in Gaza, where they've killed a little over 90 civilians, but 450 fighters, which is not that bad a ratio. It's bad, every civilian dead is terrible, but their ratio in the north is way, way better than it is in Gaza. Hezbollah also has killed about 21 soldiers and 13 civilians, if I remember right. So that ratio, not as good as the Israelis, by the way, in that case, but also not disastrous. So,
but wouldn't you argue that Hezbollah is a more formidable enemy?
Of course,
compared to Hamas?
It is. How formidable Hezbollah is, I don't really know, because look, they don't have the jets that Israel does. Israel's going to take out all of those tanks and missile banks that you just saw in about 10.5 minutes, and that's going to be that. The real danger is an endless guerrilla warfare. So the kind that started in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So so where Israel and the US are overconfident is, it doesn't matter. We have jets, we have nukes, we have everything, and we crush these people for centuries on end. There's never going to be any repercussions. But eventually, something always explodes. And in this case, I think the real problem, if you had a bigger war, is the guerrilla warfare that would happen on a scale we've never seen before, including with drones, which are much, much harder to knock down, especially if they're launched from nearby. So Israel should not be overconfident. Your security is at risk if there is a larger war. Your security is, they think, oh my God, if we don't retaliate and bomb the living crap out of every Muslim we see, we're at risk. No, you're at risk for doing that, not because you're doing that. So anyway, one more thing that's important here. So Hezbollah has said, we're just doing this to support Hamas and the Palestinian people in Gaza. The minute there's a ceasefire, we're definitely going to stop our missiles. Again, you take anything you want with a grain of salt, right? But that does match their earlier actions, okay? So, and Hamas has agreed to the ceasefire. Literally everyone has agreed to the ceasefire except Benjamin Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich. So the Israeli government is holding up the ceasefire, which is what caused all of this in the first place. So you then assign moral culpability in any way you like, but those are the facts.
Now let's talk a little bit about how Israel claims it's going to respond to this. They already have. Luckily, the response hasn't been as devastating as one would expect, especially considering how Israel has conducted itself in the Gaza Strip. So why don't we begin with Naftali Bennett arguing that Hezbollah has now declared war on Israel.
We spoke with former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett last hour. He said both Hezbollah and Lebanon have effectively declared war on Israel, and Israel must now respond accordingly.
The state of Lebanon essentially shot a rocket made in Iran. We know the name of the guy who shot it. His name is Ali Mahmoud Yahya. These rockets were made in Iran, Iranian rockets, 50 kilograms of a warhead, and it's time that we hit back.
And hit back they did. Now, Israel's Security Cabinet authorized the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Defense Minister to essentially respond on the manner and timing against Hezbollah. Netanyahu argued that Israel's response would be severe, but luckily so far, and I hope I don't jinx this, Israel strikes on what the IDF said were Hezbollah weapons caches and infrastructure fell short, according to the Washington Post, of the furious response Israeli officials had threatened. Now, who knows, they could continue responding in a far more severe way. But I do think it's also important to talk about what members of that local community that suffered this strike are saying, including a 72-year-old who lived his entire life in Majal Shams. His name is Fauzi Jabber, and he says, "I wish to be finished with this tragedy and this crazy war. The United States must back peace, not the war, and not the Israeli government, which doesn't want peace, not in Lebanon and in Gaza, but in all the Middle East." And I think that he has a point there. And when I say that, I'm specifically referring to Prime Minister Netanyahu egging on a war with Iran, trying to drag the United States military into a war with Iran. And unfortunately, you have American congressmen, including someone you're about to hear from, essentially regurgitating the same talking points that Netanyahu was spewing while he was speaking before a joint session of Congress. So I want to get to that next, because this statement that you're about to hear from Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer, again, is very similar to what Netanyahu has been saying, and I think that this is an attempt to manufacture consent for a US invasion into Iran. Take a look.
I think what this shows us is of Iran and its continued attack on our allies, but also on democracy in the United States. As the foreign minister one of the foreign ministers recently said from Hezbollah, said Israel is merely a tool. The main war, the real war, is with America. The bigger point here is whether you're talking about the Houthis and their attack on Israel, but also on the United States, on our service members, other Iranian-backed proxies in Iraq and Syria, continuing to attack the United States and our service members around the world. What you see here is terror, at its worst, and that's really what Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and others and the Houthis. That's what this is about. It's an attack not just on Israel, but an attack on democracy.
There are incredibly serious claims from Representative Gottheimer, who's part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a caucus that apparently is trying to cause more problems. I wanted to look into the statement that he made about the foreign minister of Hezbollah saying that Israel is just a tool and that the real war is with the United States. He's fear-mongering about how, we got to be careful. This is a threat to our democracy. I looked into it. It wasn't a foreign minister who said this. It was actually the head of Hezbollah, and I want to read you verbatim the statement because it was not what Gottheimer is claiming. The quote is, "America is entirely responsible for the ongoing war on Gaza and its people, and Israel is simply a tool of execution."
Okay, yeah, so look, first of all, I wonder why people in that area blame America when we've given Israel $300 billion over the course of its existence. We just gave it $26 billion after we saw them at that point butcher about 37,000, 38,000 people. I wonder why they're upset at America. No, it probably has nothing to do with us funding their endless slaughter of Muslims in the region. I bet they're just against democracy. What a joke Josh Gottheimer and these clowns are. You think Hezbollah and Hamas gives a damn about Albuquerque? The only thing they care about is stop funding Israel. They're slaughtering us and they're oppressing us and they're occupying us. That's complicated? That's not complicated. You really think this has to do with democracy? Look, Donald Trump actually tried a coup attempt with fake electors. But these clowns in the Democratic establishment Now, they never even cared about that. I know they didn't care about that because that's the same clown who was like, Biden's totally fine. Who cares if we lose to Trump? Don't care at all. Because Josh Gottheimer is a neoconservative Republican anyway. He's a giant corporatist, will do anything that a corporation asks him to do and a donor asks him to do. So he doesn't care about the Democrats losing. He doesn't care about democracy or any of that garbage. But he thinks Israel's super important, more important than America. So we have to make sure that we start wars on behalf of Israel. And what's the talking point lately? Oh, it was Russia before. And by the way, they'll bring Russia back on this too. But now everything is democracy. So all of a sudden, Israel they have to occupy Muslims for 50, 60 years. They have to make sure they have no rights and bomb them to oblivion anytime they want. And if they don't have the right to do that, then we don't really have democracy. And these no good Muslims, they're against democracy. Okay, you're a joke. Anybody who believes that is a joke and a propagandist. So I'm past the old school stuff where these guys would gaslight us. Now they look like comical fools. I don't know, a single real person that isn't following politics, in politics, lives in Washington, who doesn't think guys like Josh Gottheimer are the most obvious, corrupt joke of so-called representatives.
And they're lazy. I mean, honestly, find a new bit, okay? I just love how threat to democracy is now attached to anything Democrats don't like.
Yeah, and by the way, that's why this is like false charges of racism. If you actually care about racism, false charges of racism are a disaster because they make everybody go, oh, I guess it's not a real issue because you're using it for political theater,
yeah,
right?
Boy who cried wolf.
So now when you use democracy for, hey, I gotta kill more Muslims, that's democracy. Well, now when you actually worry about the fake electors, no one believes you. No one believes you because of joker liars like Josh Gottheimer. Okay, so let me continue. He said, oh, this is terror at its worst. Really? Okay, let me ask you an interesting question. So 12 kids and teenagers killed there, and that breaks my heart. I don't really know that it breaks Netanyahu's heart or that right-wing government, monstrous government in Israel currently, because those are Druze Arabs, and they're illegally occupying Golan Heights. They don't view those people as Israelis, and those people definitely don't view themselves as Israelis. They hate Israel, and they didn't want any Israeli officials at the burial. They're occupied. They're not Israelis, but now all of a sudden Israel cares a lot about them now that Netanyahu has an opportunity to start a much larger war. But okay, for real people, whether you're on Israel's side or Palestinian side or any side, you care about those 12 children, right? Good people in Israel care, good people everywhere care about those 12 children. So everybody says, well, Israel's got a right to defend itself because these children have been killed. Interesting, okay, fair. So wait a minute, 15,000 children were killed in Gaza.
Likely more.
So do the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? I mean, 12 children dead, obviously you have a right to defend yourself. 15,000 dead, no right to defense? What form can that defense take? Because if the Palestinians do violence, obviously goddamn terrorist, savage Muslims, obvious, we all agree. Then if they go to the UN, they're like, oh, goddamn savage terrorists. Wait a minute, what the hell? We're going to the UN just like Israel did to get a state. You do diplomacy, you try to have reporters and doctors and nurses go to the wall. You remember that a couple of years ago? All executed, shot in the head by IDF. So there is no form of protest by Palestinians that is allowed. There is no right of defense for Palestinians ever, even with words, even with diplomacy. So Israel can kill and bomb endlessly for a right to defense, self-defense. But if any Muslim ever dares try self-defense after slaughter, after slaughter, after slaughter, oh, well, of course, these savages. You don't like it, the racism pours out of every pore of these corrupt politicians in Washington. They don't care about Muslim lives at all. And now to use these Druze as like your fodder for war, as if you give a damn about them, please.
By the way, currently 81% of the Gaza Strip is declared an evacuation zone, meaning millions of Palestinians are told to evacuate to just 19% of land in a region that was already incredibly tiny and densely populated. That is what what's going on right now in Gaza. That is what Palestinians are dealing with. Everyone's focused on a million other stories, and they have been forgotten for the most part, especially by our media here in America. But I do want to thank Democracy Now! For staying on that topic, because I wouldn't know that fact had I not watched their broadcasts on the issue. But Cenk, I guess I'm in the mood to, provoke or evoke your fury, because Gottheimer was outdid by an appearance by Mark Dubowitz, who's the CEO of FDN for Defense of Democracies. He was on Fox.
Democracy, hilarious.
And he thinks all we really need to do is worry about arming Israel more. Take a look.
Is Israel capable of fighting a two-front war?
Well, it's actually a seven-front war for Israel right now, with Lebanon and Syria, the West Bank, Gaza, the Houthis attacking them from Yemen, Iraqi Shiite militias from Iraq, and Iran itself, which attacked them directly on April 13th. So the problem is that the Biden-Harris administration's policies completely failed. I mean, the policy is to ask Israel to stand down. They've put immense pressure on Israel. They're not providing Israel with the munitions that Israel needs to fight a seven-front war. And they followed a strategy of maximum concessions to Tehran, and it's really been a collapse in American power, deterrence, and Israel is now paying the steep price for this.
So the argument here is, no, a ceasefire is a failed policy, a failed idea. Because we don't have a ceasefire, first of all, you have Hezbollah retaliating against Israel because of the ongoing war in Gaza. Today, Erdogan declared that Turkey is gonna get involved. I don't know if he's bluffing, I don't know how serious he is, but now he's arguing that Turkey wants to defend Palestinians and they're willing to go into Israel.
Yeah, by the way, Turkey is the second largest army in NATO, more critical to American security literally than any other military in the world. Larger than the German military, French military, UK military, etc. And they are a bulwark for NATO, a critical part of the pillars of NATO.
Should we go to war with them?
No, I will guarantee you that if there is the slightest conflict between Turkey and Israel, America will throw the Turkish military away and go, who cares about NATO? Who cares about our stupid defense and Russia and all the things that we've been saying? Those Turks are no good Muslims. We're not gonna keep them. If Israel says to get rid of them, we'll just make NATO smaller and we'll get rid of the second largest military that's been protecting us against all of these threats on the front in the first place. You know, we talk about how Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. First of all, it's obviously not a democracy. They occupy 5.5 million people. That's like saying the South back in the day was a democracy. They're like, oh, what? As long as you don't count the slaves, we're a democracy. So the slaves are occupied as the Palestinians are occupied. Does that offend you? Well, the occupation for 57 brutal years, destroying all of Gaza, that offends me. We're equal. We're not anywhere near equal, because occupation is a moral cancer and is causing all of these problems. So by the way, to Anna's earlier point, Gaza is the size of Las Vegas. The best estimate I saw is that over 100,000 bombs have been dropped in an area the size of Vegas. Gee, I wonder what is Gottheimer's words? Terror at its worst. Imagine if the Palestinians or any Muslim had dropped 100,000 bombs, 2,000-pound bombs, 500-pound bombs, etc., in an equivalent area in Israel. We would have nuked all of Islam. We would have probably killed about 1 billion people by now. So look, guys, the good news is no one believes this crap anymore. That guy is a giant propagandist for Israel, doesn't care about America at all, doesn't care about our allies or any of it, okay? So he's like, of course you have to rush more money and weapons to Israel. They haven't murdered enough Palestinians in Gaza yet, and they need to occupy for several more decades. And those people, they don't deserve freedom. That's why we destroyed over 80% of their buildings. And they're all homeless and refugees now. Then we need more money to make more Palestinian refugees, more Palestinian deaths. So no one believes you anymore. Obvious BS propaganda. You can get Joe Scarborough and you can get every idiot cable news host to bob their heads like idiots, like, oh yeah, Israel's the victim, Israel's the victim. I don't know anything about occupation, no. Yeah, that's easy, but cable is full of crap and no one believes our garbage anymore. So come to the rest of the country. and ask them, hey, who do you think is the aggressors here? Even with all the massive bias against Muslims in America, even now the polling shows, no, obviously Israel's the aggressor, obviously. No, gee, 100,000 bombs, the whole place is leveled, 40,000 dead. But you're the victims? You're tiny little David fighting on 7 fronts. Oh, we only have nukes and in the entire US military. And we could kill you at any time. We could kill all of you. And they brag about it all the time. They're like, it's not a genocide. We only killed 40,000 of them. We could have killed them all. Don't make us do it. Oh, you guys sound real humanitarian. Israel should get $0. They're not an ally. All they do is drag us into more wars. Now they'd like to drag us into the biggest war the Middle East has ever seen. No, thank you. Israel is not an ally. All they've ever done is cause us massive problems in the Middle East. Gotten our kids killed, spent hundreds of billions of dollars. Hey, if you're such a special ally, why don't you give me the 300 billion back? That's something that Republicans and Democrats can agree on. I'm tired of you killing people with our money. But even if you're not tired of that, hey, special ally, where's my goddamn money? Why don't you give me the 300 billion back and then we'll be special allies again? Until then, a giant glass of shut up juice for these propagandists in Congress and media.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll get back into domestic news, including potential VP picks for Kamala Harris.
All right, back on TYT. Jules, to you, I'm gonna start with Twitch, which is I don't do often. Wrote in, how many innocent Palestinian children have been killed while playing, sleeping, walking, or at a hospital while getting cancer treatment? The answer is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, in those exact fact patterns that you laid out, and obviously well over 15,000 overall. You remember the kid who had his head severed when they lit the refugee camp on fire by dropping a giant bomb on it? Okay, but no, that doesn't count. Nothing Israel does ever counts. There is no amount of Palestinian or Muslim children that Israel can kill for it to count. It doesn't matter if it was 150,000 or 1.5 million. It would never matter as long as AIPAC funds elections in America. And I'm gonna say it for the 2 billionth time in a row, not just AIPAC. Later in the show, we're gonna tell you about the crypto bros. And the crypto bros are now saying, hey, there's open bribery, so yeah, they arguably do it more than AIPAC. And they're like, if a politician doesn't listen to us, one of the Winklevoss idiot twins is like, there's gonna be consequences. Because if you don't follow the donors in any field, there's gonna be consequences. But if you're an average American, they can screw you all day, all night, and no politician cares about you. Octo Squiddy says, I don't give a flying F-stick who started it. I wanna know who's gonna end it by negotiating a peace deal. Well, here's a shortcut answer to that. Not Benjamin Netanyahu. Certainly not Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who are full-blown fascists. Stone Cold Rock says, Israel's been poking and prodding the Muslim world for too long. I fear that the entire Muslim community will launch a full-scale war. Look, Muslims don't want any part of that war. What if Muslims in Indonesia want to get involved in a war for? They don't want that, right? Muslims in India, there's 200 million Muslims in India. They don't want any part of a war, right? But look, we're all tribal. And so when you hear your people are being slaughtered endlessly, at some point, you're risking a giant war we cannot control. Why? Because Israel would like to occupy Muslims for longer. They'd like to take a bigger percentage of the West Bank and a bigger percentage of Gaza. Like I'm supposed to give a goddamn about I want to steal more land in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Hence democracy. America, come in, give me money, give me money, give me money. Fund my wars, tell everyone I'm a saint, I have the most moral army, tell everyone that Muslims are evil, satanic savages, and then I'll pretend that that they're the bigots, etc. And you're not allowed to complain. You're not allowed to complain, okay? Yeah, sad day, I missed that memo. Viewbot Prime says offensive war versus Iran will not be successful. The hubris needs to stop. There is no end to American and Israeli hubris, okay? No, nothing's gonna stop. They're gonna just agitate until they get a giant war, and then what are we gonna do? Of course we're gonna fight it, of course we are. But at some point, forget about a rebellion in the rest of the world. Muslims have no power. Doesn't matter if all 1.6 billion go to war against Israel. They'll get annihilated. The military of Israel and America is so much larger. What matters is a rebellion inside America. We're tired of this crap and we don't want to fund it anymore. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Your handles at least give me some joy in the day. So Maya the Cute Mango, thank you for becoming a member at tyt.com/team. And Mary Farrell and Dustin Shoot, thank you guys for doing it on YouTube. They hit the join button below the video. And Swedane Dragon and Jesse, thank you for gifting memberships. You guys are beautiful. Anna.
Well, there is one potential Kamala Harris VP pick that seems to be getting a lot of attention from progressives, and it's mostly because of what he's been doing in his own state on economic issues. Let's see who he is.
Trump is trying to paint Vice President Harris as an ultra liberal. Of all her potential running mates, you might have the most progressive record as governor. I know you were more of a moderate when you were in the House, but you've legalized recreational marijuana, you passed universal background checks on guns, you expanded LGBTQ protections, you implemented tuition-free college for low-income Minnesotans. There's free breakfast and lunch for school kids. Do you think your record is an asset to the ticket, or would it risk fueling Trump's attacks as you being a big government liberal?
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn.
While we still have no idea who presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris will choose as her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is clearly marketing himself and his accomplishments as governor of Minnesota. And here he is rattling off all of the policies that he has managed to implement in his state while speaking to Jake Tapper on CNN.
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn, and women are making their own healthcare decisions. And we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness. Look, they're gonna label whatever they're gonna label. He's gonna roll it out, mispronounce names, to try and make the case. The fact of the matter is, where you see the policies that Vice President Harris was a part of making, Democratic governors across the country executed those policies, and quality of life is higher, the economy are better, all of those things. Educational attainment is better. So yeah, my kids are gonna eat here, and you're gonna have a chance to go to college, and you're gonna have an opportunity to live where we're working on reducing carbon emissions. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have personal incomes that are higher, and you're gonna have health insurance. So if that's where they wanna label me, I'm more than happy to take the label.
I particularly love his unapologetic style. The fact that he doesn't seem to be the type of person who's gonna easily cave to the questionable framing that Jake Tapper had in that question, because he tried to make it seem like, I don't know, your progressive policy implementation in your own state might not be an asset to Kamala Harris, right? Which I thought was an interesting way of framing that question. But he hit back, Walz did, with, in my opinion, the kind of unapologetic strength that politicians on the left should have, and I'm glad to see that he does have that. One other point that, go ahead, Cenk. I have another point I want to make about.
Yeah, I have a lot of points to make about Tim Walz, but in terms of the question, the framing, look, by itself, I don't mind the question as long as you've got someone that can actually answer it like Tim Walz. My problem for the last 40 years has been Democrats' usual answer to that is, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not a progressive. I'm as a Republican, close to as Republican as I could possibly get. I'm so sorry, right? So it's so refreshing to hear someone say, goddamn right we did these policies, and look at their fantastic results. And he does it with a smile on his face. It's a perfect answer. But like, But the context is Anna is correct about. Jake Tapper and every cable news anchor for my entire life, whenever you do anything decent for the average American, they're like, doesn't that make you radical progressive? What? Okay, if progressive means helping kids get lunch and making sure you got health care and higher wages, yeah, great, please shout it from the rooftops. Last part of the dishonest framing on that is people are pretending that Kamala Harris is progressive. So they're like, wait, is it a problem to have two very similar progressives
Jake, yes,
on the ticket?
Yes, such a good point. Yes. Keep going.
Yeah, similar. How? What has Kamala Harris done that's progressive? You guys are just calling her progressive just because Donald Trump is calling her far left progressive. Why is cable news helping Donald Trump with a ludicrous talking point? Kamala Harris hasn't done anything progressive.
So I have a theory on that. In terms of economic policy, she is not a progressive. There's no indication that she's progressive. In fact, back in 2021, when she had the ability to essentially do away with the Senate parliamentarian to essentially allow for the passage of a higher minimum wage, like she didn't do that. She didn't take that opportunity. The reason why they see her as progressive is because she engages in the culture war optics of progressivism. Right, like that's all it is. But in terms of like
barely,
not barely. Okay, like the promoting of cops bad, all of that stuff. Like she did engage in that, and it's
for
optics.
A brief time. But what she actually did was she was a cop, right? And
okay, she used to be a very effective prosecutor back in the day. Once that came out of style with the Democratic Party, she immediately pivoted to defund the police and all of that stuff.
So a 6-month rhetorical pivot.
Yes.
Rhetorical on one tiny issue apparently makes her a far left progressive. I wish she was a progressive.
Okay.
She's not anywhere near a progressive.
But what's also not helping, and I really want progressives and leftists to be aware of this, is the fact that they went from hating her, thinking that she's a cop, to now promoting her like crazy, right? And that gives this air, it gives this like idea that Kamala Harris is beloved by leftists and progressives. And what I'm trying to communicate here is they have given their leverage away, because obviously you want someone like Tim Walz to be the running mate as opposed to someone who's more conservative or moderate like Mark Kelly, right? A senator from Arizona. And so if progressives are already 100% on board with Kamala Harris, what leverage does she have? Or what leverage do they have to push her to choose Tim Walz over Mark Kelly? Now you look at Mark Kelly, consider that he's from Arizona. He has attacked his own party, the Democratic Party, over border policies. Kamala Harris knows that she's gonna be targeted and attacked by Trump on immigration. So right now, really, it's the moderate to conservative Democrats who have the leverage to push Kamala Harris to choose Mark Kelly rather than someone like Tim Walz. Stop giving your cookies away, progressives, okay? Like this coconut pill thing is embarrassing. Okay, you can support
And it's based on nothing. It's based on nothing. So look, I'm not going to agree with any kid who just showed up. It's like a 14-year-old who's like, oh my God, Kamala Harris is so progressive. Show me a policy. Show me a policy. Don't tell me, oh, did you know she's the first black woman vice president? Hey, 14-year-old, yes, I know that. That's not policy, okay? So I'm not interested in her identity, and that doesn't prove a damn thing. Ben Carson is also African American. You should look into that. Do you know who he is?
Is he progressive?
Anyway, I don't know. And anyways, look, cable news has an agenda. Their agenda is pick the most corporate friendly candidates, period. So that's why they're saying like, oh, more progressive or populist leaning people, especially if they're economically populist, as Tim Walz is and Josh Harris is in Pennsylvania, okay? I'm sorry, Josh Shapiro.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so they're like, oh, that wouldn't balance the ticket. You have to balance the ticket. Mark Kelly says Kamala Harris is a progressive. Mark Kelly, as a total corporatist, conservative, boring white dude, would balance the ticket, right? That's the agenda. When in reality, if you actually cared about balancing the ticket, Kamala Harris, in all of her actions, has been, to say very corporate friendly, would be an understatement, okay? You would balance it with someone who is an economic populist like Tim Walz or Josh Shapiro. You wouldn't go to Mark Kelly because that's more of the same, but you will get the exact opposite propaganda on cable news.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, I just want to remind you all that Tim Walz and the state of Minnesota has been getting props for some time now over the implementation of wonderful economic policies. In fact, this is an MSNBC interview from a year ago where they listed some of those policies. So let's take a look at that.
The list of accomplishments for this recent legislative session is impressive. Democrats codified abortion rights, paid family and medical leave, sick leave, transgender rights protections, driver's licenses for undocumented residents, restoration of voting rights for people when they're released from prison or jail, wider voting access, and adopted background checks for private gun transfers, and a red flag warning system to take guns from people deemed by a judge to be a threat to themselves or others. And that's just a few of the things done this session.
So he doesn't talk the talk, he walks the walk. And again, that's a video from a year ago, well before Kamala Harris was going to be the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. And so I do think that he would add something robust and important to the ticket. It would certainly calm some of my concerns about Kamala Harris, especially considering the fact that she's been taking a lot of money from the business community. I mean, she was, Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn, donated $7 million to her campaign, hoping that she will get elected and fire Lina Khan, the head of the FTC, who is hated by the business community because she actually wants to enforce antitrust laws and break up big monopolies. And so we'll see how that plays out. But right now, all of the incentives for Kamala Harris, considering the fact that progressives are already on board with her, indicate that she should go for Mark Kelly as opposed to someone like Tim Walz, and I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, so look, my thoughts on the vice presidential candidate are narrowing significantly. So I thought doubling down on an all-female ticket with Gretchen Whitmer, not policy-wise, but strategy-wise, politics would have been savvy, would have been a good strategic move, but she's now withdrawn from the race 8 different times. So I'm assuming that she's correct on that and she's not really available anymore. Beshear is much more conservative, but he's won in Kentucky twice. I still have him as a dark horse potential. Just on the winning part, not on the policy part. Mark Kelly does nothing. Buttigieg does nothing. It's just more corporate friendly guys who are not remotely economically populist. They don't connect with the average person. Telling me that they're an astronaut or they're gay doesn't help at all. Those are just random things having nothing to do with policy or strategy, okay? And by the way, you shouldn't count the fact that Pete Buttigieg is gay against them either, or Shapiro being Jewish, or any of the random things. Oh, I think Americans hate this or that, and I'm gonna, no. What Americans want is somebody that fights for them. They don't care if the person is gay, Jewish, black, Muslim. They don't care about any of that, okay? They just want somebody to fight for them. And if that is the right way to pick it, a balanced ticket is better. It unifies the party. And so that leaves me, and although I would love Bernie and I would love Jamie Raskin, who I've mentioned 17 different times, those are not realistic at this point. They're not in consideration, right? So of the people that are in consideration, to me, Tim Walz is a great one. I mean, how much more do you want him to do in Minnesota? And he's got both progressive social issues and progressive economic issues, tons of economic populism there that delivers for the average person in Minnesota, no matter who they are, okay? And Shapiro in Pennsylvania went after the Wall Street guys that charge way too much for the pensions, kicked out a bunch of Wall Street firms. That is super courageous because that pisses off a lot of the donors and actually gets a lot of money back to the average worker in Pennsylvania. He went against predatory lenders. Again, economically populist, politically courageous. They're both good speakers. Shapiro sounds a little too much like Barack Obama.
100%.
Okay, like bring it down, even though I like him.
Just be a normal person.
Yeah. Tim Walz is a great speaker and sounds and looks like an average dude.
Yes, totally.
And that's the optics of politics, that helps.
I agree, I totally agree. All right, well, we'll stay on the topic and give you updates as we learn more about who Kamala Harris is vetting and speaking to. For now, though, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, yet another big money donor goes on CNBC and urges whoever ends up getting elected to ditch Lina Khan. We'll be right back.
All right, let me start with the disagreement and then we'll keep going. Clement Boston writes, and Jen, Kamala supported the Green New Deal, Medicare for All, signing a ban on AR-15s by executive order, ending all private health care coverage, etc. I love your brothers and sisters, but most of that is not really true. And so let me explain, okay? So number one, signing a ban on AR-15s by executive order, I believe that she did support that, and I believe her that she supported that, okay? And it's by executive order, so there's no Congress to deal with, etc. So I give her credit for that. Ending all private healthcare coverage and Medicare for All is the same thing. She said that for a minute during the campaign. She then changed her mind in the middle of the 2020 campaign, let alone now.
Correct.
Ask her about it today. She'll tell you she's not for Medicare for All. She's not for ending private health insurance. She's gone back to the corporate position, and it took her about 13 seconds to do that. So look, she's infinitely better than Joe Biden. I want to win. She's much more likely to win than Joe Biden. But please don't get false hope that she's some sort of progressive hero. She's a very standard politician that changes with the wind depending on how things are going. And she definitely is not for Medicare for All. Last thing, Green New Deal. It depends on what you mean. If you mean the actual Green New Deal, no way. If you mean the parts of the Green New Deal that Joe Biden passed, yes, you can give her credit for that as you give credit to Joe Biden. Is it better than anybody's done before? Yes, and that's not insignificant credit. But at the same time, if you ask her for the whole package, she'll give you a hard no on it. She is not at all progressive, was not in any of those camps before it got hot and popular. And the minute she thought it wasn't hot or popular, she left those camps immediately. So our job is to just deliver the actual facts to you guys. You do anything you like with those facts. Art Guy says the energy around Harris is mostly wish casting. Be prepared for Obama-level hope and change should she get into office. Her job is to defeat Trump and preserve democracy, and that's all we should expect. That's amazing because that's basically what I just said.
Yeah.
And I had not read that comment before.
I agree.
Art Guy, great job.
Yeah, one of the viewers tweeted into me and said, look, progressives and leftists got excited about Kamala because they were so depressed that the Democratic Party was headed toward failure. Biden was going to lose to Trump. I understand that. I understand that relief. I totally do. What I'm trying to say is maybe celebrate privately, but don't spend all day on social media talking about how Kamala Harris is your new hero. Because again, she's got to work for the vote. And if progressives are already massive Harris stans, what incentive does she have to choose a progressive running mate as opposed to a moderate to conservative running mate?
Yeah, look, no. Celebrate all you want. I'm celebrating. Look, I'm ecstatic about the change because we had no chance of winning, and now we have a great chance of winning. But don't then add on she's a progressive because she isn't. It's just put aside everything else. Anna makes great points about leverage. It just isn't true. So you don't need to add things that aren't true. I do declare says Walz for VP. He may be too progressive for Harris, but he's right for the American people. Rage Against the Machine says, I'm so glad Walz is marketing his progressive policies as a moderate thing. Literally all of those policies are moderate and should be framed as such. If you look at the policies on the worldwide stage, they're the bare minimum. I mean, you're talking of chapter 1 of Justice is Coming. I wrote a whole book about this. 100% right. Those are the most moderate policies there is. Craig Curry Souffle says Harris would be a damn fool not to pick Tim Walz as VP. There's so many more comments, but we're out of time. We'll be right back. on TYT. Cenk, Anna, Be Nice 1969. Let's see, I like these handles. They just joined through tyt.com/team. And on YouTube, James Stewart just joined by hitting the join button below. I don't know if that's Jimmy Star. Oh, come on now, cut it out. Or if that's James Stewart, former running back for the Jaguars. Anyway, J Bomb Dragon gifted 5 memberships and said, enjoy the subs. I'm celebrating my good blood test results and excellent dental hygienist report.
Oh, yeah,
good for you. Okay, that's awesome.
You be flossing.
Okay, more shout outs later in the program. All right, Anna.
Well, we've got some more updates on how the business community is looking to destroy Lina Khan, the head of the FTC. So let's get into it.
When you talk to other business leaders here, do you get the sense that some of those who had even switched to Trump will switch back?
I think it's possible, yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I think, listen, they are a herd of pragmatists. And when the wind shifted and it was really clear if Biden was staying in, Trump was going to be president, I think when that changed, I think, again, for everybody, and it certainly did for people who were wavering or who said for economic reasons, oh, let's chime into Trump quickly.
Yet another big money donor has his sights set on getting rid of Federal Trade Commission Chair Lina Khan for, enforcing antitrust laws, preventing mega mergers from happening, something that those who are already incredibly successful really, really don't like. They want to increase the barriers of entry, something that Lina Khan is trying to deal with. Now, Barry Diller, who's the chairman and senior executive of IAC and Expedia Group, says that business leaders were already placing their bets on Donald Trump, donating money to him, planning on supporting him as the new president of the United States. But now they're reconsidering, since Biden is no longer the presumptive Democratic nominee, since Kamala Harris is. And so she might be more receptive to the idea of getting rid of Lina Khan. Diller, by the way, called Lina Khan a dope, and he elaborates on how much he dislikes her in this next clip.
There have been reports that a number of prominent Democrats have been lobbying Harris to drop people like Lina Khan. Do you think that that's going to happen? And would you lobby for that?
Yeah, I would.
You would?
Yeah, I think she's a dope.
Barry, what's the biggest problem? It's just the regulatory, the idea that nobody's allowed to do any mergers or acquisitions with Lina Khan. What's your biggest issue?
I think what it is that there's an absolute conviction based upon what she has done, that almost anything that business wants to do to expand itself, to combine with others for efficiency and other reasons, is just not allowed. It's almost like it's a wet blanket that has been thrown on all of this. And I don't think that's productive. I mean, look, there are very clear cases where competition needs to be regulated, et cetera, but it seems her point of view is everything is bad and everyone is bad.
Okay, I don't think this needs to be explained, but just in case, let me explain why it's important to have someone like Lina Khan as the head of the FTC. When you have these mega mergers, you end up with less options as the consumer. So think of it this way. Let's say you're living in an apartment building. You don't get an option in regard to who your cable service provider is or your internet service provider. For me, I have to rely on Spectrum. I have no other options. So Spectrum can charge me whatever they want. And by the way, they do every year. They increase the rate by $10 to $20. I have no other choice. Lina Khan is the kind of person who sees that as an injustice in our economic system. So when you see these billionaires talking about doing away with Lina Khan, they're at war with you, the consumer. They want you to have less options. They want these mega mergers to happen, so you only have maybe one, maybe two options when it comes to various services, various businesses that you might be interested in being a consumer of. So it's just so incredibly frustrating. Look, I think they're gonna do it. I think Lina Khan is done for, to be honest with you, because there's a lot of money going into Harris's campaign to do away with Lina Khan. I'm sure that similar lobbying is happening on the Republican side as well. And so her days are probably numbered, but it's just so sad to see it. And it's sad to see that there's like no aggressive pushback on these talking points by executives, I would like to see some Democrats provide some cover or defense of Lina Khan, but they're not doing that.
Oh, of course not. They don't want to anger corporate donors. But to be fair to the Biden administration, they did put in Lina Khan. So that's a huge positive and credit you should give to Joe Biden for doing that. So now look, I don't necessarily agree with Lina Khan on the so-called tech monopolies. But here's who agrees with her on monopolies overall. Adam Smith, the guy who literally wrote the book on capitalism. And so, if you went to business school as I did, or if you took any kind of economics class, one of the first things they teach you is that when you're setting up a capitalist system, you must have a check on monopolies, because monopolies naturally form, and when they do, they immediately try to kill off the free market. So if you want to maintain a free market, you must bust monopolies. If you don't, you're gonna lose the free market entirely, and it's just gonna turn into corporatism or crony capitalism. There's a couple of words for it, right? So that's what Lina Khan's doing. If you want to disagree around the edges, hey, I don't think she should go to the tech industry as much as the oil industry, etc. Okay, great, good intellectual conversations to have, good important policy conversations to have. You want to talk about overregulation? I'm all ears. Sometimes Democrats do overregulate. For example, I don't agree with their regulations on ride shares. The Ubers, the Lyft, etc., the regulation they passed in California. I don't necessarily agree with rent control. So we could have rational discussions about economic policy. But when I see every owner of a giant multinational corporation on TV going, I'm giving millions of dollars, and in return, I would like the head of this political appointee, proverbially, of course, and politically. And I want you to fire her because I just bribed you. I mean, paid you. I mean, gave you a campaign contribution. And I don't care to have a nuanced discussion about what she's right about, what she is wrong about. She's preventing us from having giant companies that rule over your lives, occupy you and oppress you. And so she's gotta go. If she's bothered us because we demand to have complete control over your lives. You're living under corporate rule. And so here's the heads of these giant corporations going, how dare you raise your head? So make sure that you fire her now that you've gotten your orders, Kamala Harris. Whether she does it is a different question.
Understand that Lina Khan is not a legislator, okay? She is not making up rules. She's not passing legislation that increases the number of regulations. Her job is merely to enforce the laws and the rules as it pertains to antitrust. They don't want her to do that. They don't want a cop on the beat. So that's why they want to get rid of Lina Khan. Now,
I'm sorry, Anna, can I just add one quick thing to that? Guys, they're saying nonsensical things. And Barry Diller and Reid Hoffman are super smart guys. They're not dummies, right? They're saying like, oh, she's fighting against monopolies, that's terrible. Why is that terrible? That's a dumb thing to say for very smart people, okay? No, if you say, hey, I have an issue, I don't think in this particular industry it is monopoly power, okay, that's a fair comment to say. But if you say that you're against her because she's fighting against monopolies in every industry, well then you're saying, I don't really believe in the free markets or capitalism. And so that's why it's totally unacceptable what they're saying.
I mean, Diller called her a dope.
That's
right,
ridiculous.
You're gonna call Lina Khan dumb, really?
Oh, then why are you so worried about her? Why don't you run circles around her? Because I acknowledge Barry Diller is very smart. If she's a dope, you could easily run circles around her. Apparently, you're actually worried that she's not a dope.
Now, while members of the Democratic Party haven't really done much to defend her and the excellent work she's been doing, luckily she's good at defending herself, and she's always composed, she's always principled, and she always stays on message. So let's take a look at how she defended herself while speaking to Bloomberg.
But I have heard specifically multiple tech executives and investors complain about how they can't do deals on your watch. Do you have any concerns that your agenda has at all alienated the tech community or could impact the impact of your agenda going forward?
You know, it's been such an honor to serve in the Biden-Harris administration, and you know, we're just focused on doing our work. What I oftentimes hear from the business community, including small businesses, including entrepreneurs, is that they want markets to be more open and more fair and more competitive, rather than incumbents being able to squash out nascent competitive threats. I mean, our free enterprise system is one where the best ideas are supposed to win, and we've historically seen that it's the disruptors and entrepreneurs that have been a key vector of innovation. And so our job at the FTC, when we enforce the antitrust laws, is to make sure that our markets stay open and fair and competitive. And that's something that, you know, most businesses and most entrepreneurs should really be able to get behind.
And she's public enemy number one, according to these corporate executives.
What she just said there is empirically true. Big business not only winds up having a monopoly power and being able to raise your prices, as we saw during inflation, they bragged about price gouging in shareholder calls. We've shared that with you many times. They're like, oh, it turns out that they could bear more costs. Well, why? Because they don't have any options. You own all the supermarkets. So they raised prices way beyond inflation and they bragged about it. So you see how it hurts that. But it also hurts small businesses who are trying to compete in a so-called free market. And by the way, you can tell that that's true because the right wing has invested in a lot of smaller businesses fighting against the big tech companies, and all of a sudden, they're for breaking up the big tech companies and they're against monopolies. So be careful of everybody's interests, and I tell you, and I'm honest about ours, for example, we're a smaller company, generally in digital media, and we have a lot of different interests. I don't want Google broken up. I don't think that that's good for the country, but I also don't think it's good for us, and I'm honest about that, right? On the other hand, there's people who would love to have Google broken up, like people who invested in Rumble and are competing with YouTube.
Yeah.
That's Peter Thiel, JD Vance, literally himself invested, etc. So strange bedfellows here, but everybody's actually just arguing for their own economic interest and not for the average American. But the point that Lina Khan is making is indisputably true. Whenever you say big businesses should be able to get bigger and bigger and bigger and swallow up everyone until there's almost no competition, you're definitely hurting the average consumer and you're definitely hurting small businesses and entrepreneurs.
Final thing I'll say is these mega mergers happen to be part of the reason why, actually a big reason why, our media is broken, right? Our media has been bought off by these major corporate conglomerates, and those major corporate conglomerates control the message, right? So when you look at the things that are broken in American society today, just consider where the money comes from, what companies control whatever institution you're critical of or you're seeing, issues with. Media conglomerates buying up, journalistic outlets has been a terrible, terrible development for journalism in America. And so I love a lot of the work that Lina Khan is doing. I think you make a really good point, Cenk, that if there are issues, those issues should be debated in regard to what she pursues through the work she's doing. But to do away with her entirely because she actually wants to enforce laws that are already on the books is insane to me. And all of these corporate executives are making clear that they're just annoyed that they have to deal with regulations to begin with. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back for the second hour, we'll talk about a Republican mayor who has decided to endorse Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. Don't miss it.
Now I'm gonna do something very different here and read some one-star reviews of the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Donnie Franchise said, pretty much it's like listening to a trash compactor. Someone else said, negative, anti-American propaganda. And others said, out of context, misquotes, typical leftists who are afraid to debate, just smear. These two would be perfect for CNN or MSLSD. Well, Donnie, you might have a point, because I feel like a trash compactor right now after taking in all those garbage reviews. But thanks for listening anyway. We are, in fact, unapologetically progressive. And if you're not ready for bold commentary, then we're not the show for you. On the Young Turks, we speak up about the issues that matter, and we want to make positive change happen. And now here's why we actually do the show. Mariel Morales said, if found this podcast from the True Crime Podcast, Fruit Loops, and other great progressive podcasts. I've become an instant fan of the Young Turks. Great conversation, great takes, very well composed, factual podcast, very informative. Love to hear that. Z55 said, it's a joy to experience such awareness and intelligence from fascinating people. And Anna is gorgeous and brilliant. Apparently I'm just fascinating, but I'll take it. Paul for Progress said, news well delivered. Appreciate it. KOOK said, Democrats and Republicans are fair game for TYT. And if Anna or Cenk provide disinformation about anything, they will admit they made a mistake and correct it. We appreciate you noticing that we are honest. To people who actually listen to the substance of the show, thank you. Your listenership supports what we do. Leave a 5-star rating for the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Let's take the ratings back from the trolls. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members-only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together. We've been here for over 22 years, and TYT remains a trusted source of truth and unfiltered progressive commentary. But we didn't achieve this alone. Our audience is an essential part of our collective story. That's just as true today as it was decades ago. But for us to carry on into the next generation, we require additional support from viewers like you. We're still here and will always be here as long as our viewers support us at tyt.com/team. Thank you.
Have you been drinking anything today?
No, I hadn't drank in 3 years.
Good for you, congratulations.
Yeah. Until today.
Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Luis Arturo Hernandez Ramirez.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, Cenk.
I love that. Luis, good to have you, brother. Samario Dowdell, thank you, and thank you for joining at premium level. It makes a huge difference. You could also upgrade through the join button below the video on YouTube, guys. And Chaplain Friend gifted 10 memberships. You're the best. Anna.
Buckle up, this one's a doozy, but I think there's a hidden agenda here. I'm gonna decode it for you.
I like it.
So, a Republican mayor has endorsed Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. Now, in an op-ed written for AZ Central, John Giles, who is the mayor of Mesa, Arizona, writes, why, as a Republican mayor, I support Kamala Harris over Trump. Arizona Republicans like me can emulate Senator John McCain's motto of country first and beat back Trump and his threat to democracy. So I read the whole piece because I was curious what kind of arguments he's gonna make. And he didn't just simply lean into the threat to democracy argument. He actually made a lot of interesting points. But I also think that this was a an effort to promote a very specific person as Kamala Harris's running mate. So bear with me as I get through the excerpts. He writes, our party used to stand for the belief that every Arizonan, no matter their background or circumstances, should have the freedom, opportunity, and security to live out their American dream. But since Donald Trump refused to accept the outcome of the 2020 election, Republicans have yet to course correct. The Republican Party, with Trump at its helm, continues down the path of political extremism, away from focusing on our fundamental freedoms. Now more than ever, we need leaders who will put country over party. Later in the piece, he gets into very specific things that the Biden-Harris administration had accomplished for the state of Arizona. So he says significant reforms to immigration and border policies that would have addressed the crisis at our southern border were blocked by Trump because he didn't want the problem solved. He wanted to exploit it for personal political gain. And then he notes that Biden, with Harris as the VP, of course, provided funding for the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. They updated the public transit systems thanks to federal government grants. He applauded Biden for passing the CHIPS Act, which for whatever reason gets under your skin a little bit, Cenk, whenever it's applauded publicly, but okay. But he also mentioned something in the piece that caught my attention. He writes that Arizona leaders like McCain and Senator Mark Kelly have embodied the commitment to country over party. And it's the same high caliber of character and leadership I see in Vice President Harris. I think this was just an effort to try to get Harris to pick Mark Kelly.
Yeah, I thought the same exact thing when I read it. I thought, that's interesting. This brother might want to switch parties at some point. Like, I'm being literal, I'm not saying that like, oh, you might want to switch parties. Like, so this is the kind of step you would do before you flip parties. But then the second thing and predominant thing that I thought is, Arizona praising Mark Kelly, this is a way of going, look, Mark Kelly even brings in Republicans, right? So now Mark Kelly is more of a corporate Democrat, establishment Democrat, has never not loved the thing a donor has suggested. So a Republican who also loves donors liking Mark Kelly and wanting to be on the ticket is not shocking, right? And I'm not sure that guy, look, obviously I don't know all the policies of the mayor of Mesa, Arizona, right? But knowing corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans, on economic issues, I would be shocked if you could find more than a 20% difference between his positions and Mark Kelly's.
I totally agree. I would say more than a 10% difference.
Yeah.
And look, as this race develops and as we learn more about the potential VP picks, what's really standing out to me is the incentives that Kamala Harris might have to choose a Mark Kelly over a Tim Walz. It appears that obviously progressives are already backing Kamala Harris, so picking someone like Tim Walz, who I would want her to choose, doesn't really make much sense. But knowing that the Trump ticket is gonna attack her rather viciously over immigration, someone like Mark Kelly might actually help balance the, allegations of open borders under the Biden administration. So I don't know, we'll see.
But it could also reinforce that Kamala Harris is wrong, right? Or was wrong, or didn't do enough.
But okay, and to be clear, like we've been on the record, I've been on the record. I do think that the Biden administration failed miserably on immigration, absolutely miserably. Okay, so that is gonna be a problem for Kamala Harris. It was gonna be a problem for Biden as well. It didn't really matter if it was Biden or Harris, right?
Right, so look, our point of view on immigration, and Anna and I agree, is nuanced. We don't think we should be cruel to immigrants. We think that we believe in an asylum process. We believe in a lot more people being allowed in legally, but just the mess that we had at the border with no policy was not helpful at all. So that's why we disagree with the Biden administration's policies. But in this particular case, the bigger problem is a political one rather than a policy one, because the minute you put Mark Kelly as the VP nominee, if you do, they're gonna JD Vance him. Here's what I mean by that. The first thing that happened with JD Vance is you called Trump American Hitler, you called Trump American Hitler, and all the terrible things that you've said about Donald Trump. So Do you guys even agree? And so they're gonna do the same thing with Mark Kelly and Kamala Harris. Mark Kelly's for tougher immigration policies, but Kamala Harris didn't do it. Do you guys disagree? And it keeps highlighting the problems that Kamala Harris had at the border and on the immigration issue rather than mitigating it, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's not a bad point, and I do think that that could potentially hurt Kamala Harris. I want to just make a side note about that attack toward JD Vance. How JD Vance used to be very critical of Donald Trump, and then suddenly he starts promoting Donald Trump. And look, we know why that happened. We know that he did that for his own political gain, right? I don't know, and I honestly don't think that JD Vance has really changed his opinion on Donald Trump, but that doesn't matter. What I think doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not that attack on JD Vance is resonating with independent or Republican voters. And I'm here to say that Democratic voters are different from Republican voters. Republican voters want to welcome people with open arms if they say that they made a mistake and they now think that Donald Trump is great. Okay, they actually want to build broader coalitions, whereas on the left, it's a little different.
So that's another good point, which is that, I mean, you can call Trump Hitler, and the minute you say you're okay with him, they're like, bygones be bygones.
Totally, yeah.
Right? But on the Democratic side, are we sure that every transgression of Mark Kelly is going to be forgiven? I'm not sure of that at all, right? And so there's not much that's forgiven on the left side. And this is all, I mean, there's so many ironies and nuances here because Mark Kelly is very conservative corporate within the Democratic Party. But now people on the far left like that? I can't keep up anymore. It's so crazy. Because like, as old school Bernie supporters, we want economic populism. And so we want to push Kamala Harris to be more economically populist. But people on our left are like, no, she's great, we're coconut pilled. Don't have her change a thing, she's wonderfully progressive. I'm like, what? I don't even know where the political spectrum is anymore.
I know, it's weird.
So will they look at Mark Kelly, who's clearly a corporate Democrat, and be like, great, I'm bald head pilled, astronaut pilled, I don't know.
Well, okay, look, to be fair, and there's no study on this, there hasn't been an investigation into it, it's just based on what you see on social media. They're pushing hard for Tim Walz over Mark Kelly, to be fair. Progressives, yes.
Yeah, that I agree with, that makes sense, right? So look guys, whether you are progressive or you're not, it's important that we be clear about terms and what they mean, right? So to me, the thing that matters most is I've never seen Mark Kelly disagree with a donor. Donor says jump, he says how high. If you want, he'll go all the way to space for you if you're a donor, okay? Whereas Tim Walz, I don't know his relationship with the donors. I do know what he got done in Minnesota, and it was a lot of progressive policies, both socially and economically. So that's the thing we can all get behind because that makes sense, and it's backed up by the facts.
All right, so let me reset a little bit because I do want to talk about where Kamala Harris currently stands in this race against Donald Trump. You know, she is the presumptive nominee, but the polling keeps getting better and better for her. I'm sure Trump is furious about that, so let's discuss. So, new polling by ABC Ipsos shows that Kamala Harris is doing better and better in the polling against Donald Trump. Of course, she is now the presumptive Democratic nominee. And so why don't we begin with how her approval or her favorability is doing now compared to not too long ago.
Harris is, yeah, she was the VP, but now she's at the top of the ticket, and I think opinions of her are moving rather fast. So this is the net favorability ratings. This is from an ABC News Ipsos poll that literally dropped just within the last 24 hours. I'm going to be interested if other polls follow. So this is net favorability. It's favorable minus unfavorable. Look at this. A week ago, she was at minus 11 points. Look at this. She's jumped all the way up to plus 1 point. Trump has actually dropped a little bit from minus 11 to minus 16, but that movement isn't so wide compared to this 12-point movement. And I think the real question is, will this stick in other polling? Because Democrats absolutely love this, and it gets back to Steve's point that opinions on Harris, I think, are much more malleable than they were for Joe Biden, where you just had that consistently negative rating. Here, this is the first time I've seen a politician running for national office with a net positive rating. I don't know since when. I mean, it's something unforeseen, at least over the last 4 years.
So I do think that's a pretty big deal, and we might still be in the honeymoon phase with Kamala Harris. And what's also helping her, in my opinion, is how the Trump side of things is kind of fumbling in their response to Kamala Harris as now the presumptive Democratic nominee. The JD Vance statements that are now coming back up from 2021, where he said some pretty terrible things about women who don't have children, is definitely also helping Kamala Harris. But what do you think, Cenk? Do you think things can reverse back to where they were, or do you think Kamala Harris's momentum will continue?
No, they could definitely reverse. But let's talk about where we are today. So I wish I'd annoyed the producers by asking them to pull up a clip of me saying Kamala Harris's numbers will go way up. Don't listen to the numbers that show her net favorability down, et cetera, that I said about a week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that happened, must have been a week. So the reason why I said that was, number one, they don't really know her enough. They know who she is, they know she's the vice president, but what does anybody know about Kamala Harris? They knew the word salads a little bit because she got a little bit famous for that, and that drove down her approval ratings.
Yeah, they know she's brat.
Okay, they know that she has that awkward laugh because that's viral, right? And they know that she sucked on immigration. Okay, that's pretty much all that the average person who doesn't follow politics knew about Kamala Harris, if they knew anything at all. So that means your numbers can move in either direction depending on how you come out, right? And it could move much faster than Biden's numbers or Trump's numbers because those numbers are dug in. That's why I was saying Biden's in the 30s a year ago. And I'm like, guys, Biden's not gonna turn around. Everybody knows who Biden is. And he doesn't have the capability. So I'm thrilled where we are now. It's gone exactly as I thought it would. Now, I'm gonna get to the future in a second, but there's two other reasons why Kamala Harris's numbers have gone up. One, she's exciting. Why is she exciting? Because she can speak.
Yeah.
So
can you actually hold that thought?
Right.
Okay, because if you want to hear more of Cenk's analysis on this, you should wait after this clip because it talks about how she's doing in important key states.
Okay.
Let's watch.
So, this is all national polling, but ultimately it comes down to the Electoral College, and this is Harris versus Trump. These are the northern battleground states. This is all polling conducted since Kamala Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee or the very likely Democratic nominee. Look at this. In the Great Lake battleground states, pure toss-ups, +1 in Wisconsin, well within any margin of error. Michigan tied, Pennsylvania tied. We thought these were going to be tight. At this point, they look like they're going to be tight. Perhaps a little bit more interesting with these GOP reaches, where Donald Trump was competitive with Joe Biden. But look now, Minnesota, +6 Harris. Look at New Hampshire, +7 Harris. Maine, +9 Harris. The GOP reaches where they thought they could play against Joe Biden. At this particular point, it doesn't look like they can play against Kamala Harris. It looks like this election is going to be decided here in the northern battlegrounds. And then, of course, those Sun Belt battlegrounds where we don't have new polling yet, but we'll just have to wait and see. Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina. But it looks like it's going to be much more like the traditional map than it's going to be one of these wide-ranging maps where we're going to have states that put into play that we're not used to. These, at this point, at least, these particular states look like the GOP reaches will continue to be GOP reaches.
Now remember, Biden was getting spanked in those battleground states. So this is more good news for Kamala Harris, more bad news for Donald Trump. And so with that in mind, go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, so people see her and they're like, wow, that's someone who's younger and can make an effective case for Democrats. Oh my God, they're thrilled. First of all, Democrats are thrilled. That moves the numbers for some of the Democrats that were wavering and concerned about Biden. Second of all, for independents, they're like, hey, here's someone who isn't 180 years old. Because remember, Trump is also super old. So that's moving the numbers a little bit. And then she's been good on the campaign trail. So you have a situation where the numbers are ready to move. She does well, and the numbers move up, okay? Good, that's exactly the most plausible scenario. And since she's been good on the campaign trail, the scenario that we have. Now, the reason I say, hold on, don't get too excited. So 2 reasons why. Number one, yeah, it's nice to have the Democratic states back in the Democratic column. But if you're worried about those, you've already lost the election, right? So when you look at the swing states, there's still toss-ups. And she's going up against Donald Trump, who's very unpopular. So don't celebrate yet, that's point one. Point two is, this race has got a lot more ups and downs in it. It's gonna be a roller coaster ride. I would be shocked if Kamala Harris was so good that she had smooth sailing throughout, never dipped back down and crushed. No, they're gonna find an effective talking point against her. Then they're gonna find another, and then they're gonna find one against her VP nominee. And there's gonna be 3 to 4 big controversies left at least, right? And it'll take a dip and people will panic. Hold, everybody, hold. I'll tell you when it makes sense to panic, as I have before. I'll tell you when it makes sense to get excited. And right now, we're back in the ball game, but that's all, just back in the ball game.
Yeah, we went from having an uncompetitive race to now having a competitive race, which is good. That's what you want.
Yep.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll dip back into the Republican ticket. JD Vance attempts to defend himself against critics. Did it work? You're gonna have to come back and find out.
All right, so let's go to YouTube Super Chat first. There's some good comments in the member section too. All right, Joseph Recupero says, I saw a tweet from a conservative saying Democrats need to find more moderate candidates because Biden and Harris are too far left. How will we refrain from devolving into full fascism if Biden and Harris are far left? Now they could say that. The question is whether it's gonna resonate or not. And so that's another reason why the media pretending Kamala Harris is progressive isn't necessarily doing her any favors, because the Republicans and Trump are using progressive as a moniker for far left, and whether you like it or not, she's not far left. So yeah, and if you think she's far left and you want to go way further right, there's not much room there. You do run into fascism at some point. Trisha Briggs says, thank you for your never-ending truth, TYT. We appreciate you, Trisha. Now let's go to YouTube member Sarah Joyce says Trump campaign owes a lot of money to the city of Mesa for expenses related to a rally in 2020. Great point. And so that's the mayor of Mesa, Arizona. I'd forgotten that. I love how smart our members are. You know what, Sarah? $100 Blue Apron gift card. Email rewards@tyt.com to collect on that. Thank you for adding to the show. It's only for members. Hit the join button below, but I love it when you guys make great points. David Morris says, Anna, I'm sorry. Trump is the new salt queen.
That's hilarious.
That is funny. Oh man, he loves to cry. Anyway,
but
that's different than salt. Different than salt.
Yeah, I watch it.
Okay. All right, she's trying to regain her title. Matt Lovett writes in, Jen, can you explain why the left has such a problem with grifters, JD Vance, Fetterman?
When did you tweet, Cenk? How did you tweet 8 minutes ago? We were on air.
I wrote the tweet during our one ad break and then hit send when we were on air.
Right, okay.
Okay, no, I'm serious. You see, anyway, you'll see. Matt wrote in, Jen, can you explain why the left has such a problem with grifters? JD Vance, Fetterman, Sinema, Gabbard, Dave Rubin, Jimmy Dore. How do we recognize them before they do damage? How you recognize them is hard, and I don't have a great track record on that. Let's be honest about that, okay? But although Anna does, she spotted Tulsi Gabbard.
You just look at their record.
Yeah.
And like, don't rely on vibes. Like, look at their record, if there is one, you know?
But Fetterman had a perfectly good record until he turned, right?
Sometimes you can't predict it, and it happens, right? Like, I don't know what to say.
But the main question though I can answer, which is how come the left has this problem? Here's the #1 reason in a landslide, because the right wing has all the money. So once you get tired of starving, or you want more campaign contributions, or you'd like an appearance on Fox News, you go, oh, I found Jesus and Trump, and they're both the same person. How do I rush on Fox News and tell you how great Trump is, Tucker Carlson is, Fox News is, etc.? Because they make way more money on the right, and not because of the markets. Right-wing billionaires fund almost all the right-wing ecosystem, and despite what you've heard about Soros, the right-wing media ecosystem has approximately $0 behind it. So that's why all the grifters go to the right, because that's where the money is. Purple Pegasus 2531 says, hey TYT, Tim Walz is a no-brainer, would be perfect VP pick. Also, Anna has the best dresses, and Cenk, you look great too. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Jack Severston, and Grace Keene. They just became American heroes by hitting the join button below. Welcome to the Young Turks, guys. We love you. All right, Anna.
JD Vance attempts to defend himself.
What you find consistently is that many of the most unhappy and most miserable and most angry people in our media are childless adults. Let's just be honest about it. Because look, the elite model, the American dream to the elites is get as much credentials as you can, get as much money as you can, get the most prestigious job, and that's where you're gonna find your self-worth. But I gotta be honest with you, most of our mainstream reporters are not impressive enough to find a lot of self-meaning in their jobs. They're just not good enough at it.
Agree to disagree. Now that was Trump's running mate, JD Vance, in 2021, repeating similar anti-woman nonsense while passing judgment on individuals who don't have children. Now, that video is relevant today considering he's attempting to do some damage control following the reemergence of his statements on childless women being miserable cat ladies. That was something he said in the context of a Tucker Carlson interview. Now, Vance tried to pretend like he didn't actually mean what he said, what we all heard. And so here he is speaking to Trey Gowdy on Fox News. Let's see if he makes a good case for himself.
I've heard from many women, most of whom are conservative, and they would very much like to vote for President Trump and you, but Senator, they are disappointed. So nuns and priests aside, do you agree that there are people who very much love this country and are invested in its future, but they also happen to be childless?
Oh, of course I believe that, Trey. And if you look at the full context of what I said, it's very clear the Democrats have tried to take this thing out of context and blow it out of proportion, which is what they always do, Trey, because they don't have an agenda to run on themselves. And if you look at what the American people are most concerned about, Trey, it's not an out of context quip that I made 3 years ago.
Okay, great. So why don't we watch the statement he made in greater context? Let's watch.
JD Vance made a pretty obvious point. He said the childless left, that's how he put it, lacks, quote, physical commitment to the future of this country. Quote, why is this just a normal fact of life for the leaders of our country to be people who don't have a personal and direct stake in it via their own offspring? That's what he asked, and they went completely bananas. So we thought it'd be interesting to talk to JD Vance about what he meant and what it's like to be attacked for saying things that are so obviously true. What were you saying?
Look, what I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it? I just wanted to ask that question and propose that maybe if we want a healthy ruling class in this country, we should invest more, we should vote more, we should support more people who actually have kids, because those are the people who ultimately have a more direct stake in the future of this country.
Just wanted to make sure I provided more context in what he said during that interview with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, no. Now the right wing, their #1 go-to move is missing context. If you listen to all of JD Vance for his entire life, then you would have proper context. This is an old trick invented by Sam Harris. If you haven't read every one of my books, then you quoted me out of context. Okay, oh, he was kidding. That's #1 defense of Donald Trump. It was sarcastic, he was trolling, etc. No right winger is ever responsible for anything they have ever said. There is no amount of context you can give it before they'll go, oh yeah, that does actually sound bad. So keep it real. He said it. He said it many times. He's not unclear about it. He went on Megyn Kelly's show now and said it again.
Yep.
So yeah, he thinks that if you don't have children, you don't have a stake in the future of the country, which is an asinine thing to say. It's super dumb.
Yeah, and look, it goes beyond, oh, he's saying things that are hurtful, right? Politicians say dumb, hurtful things all the time. Like, who cares about that?
Yeah.
The problem is what his prescription is for childless people in America, which is you have no stake in the game. So as a result, those who do have children should have more say in our democratic process than the couples without or the women without children.
Yeah, and what does that mean? Does that mean if you don't have a kid, you're not allowed to vote? Does that mean if you have kids, you get more votes?
I think he wants people with kids to have more votes.
Yeah, okay, well, so that's just the most asinine thing I've ever heard. So back when I didn't have kids, I should have 1 vote. And now that I have 2 kids, what, I should have 3 votes? Should my wife also have 3 votes? How are we gonna rig this? And before, the minute before I had my first kid, my opinion is worthless and not that it shouldn't be taken seriously. After I have the kids, my opinion has just tripled in value. or maybe like actually went up 6-fold because if you count my wife as well. So this is just, look, it's painfully stupid. Only like deep Christian nationalists go, oh yeah, this makes sense. And by the way, the #1 reason why they think it makes sense is because they don't believe in freedom. They believe that their version of religion should rule all of us. So if they think you should have more kids, shut up and have more kids. I don't care about your stupid freedom. What do you think, this is America? No, you're gonna do what we want and what we think is moral. Otherwise, you're worthless. That's the #1 problem, and he definitely believes that.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's definitely the religious component to it. There's also the economic component of lower birth rates, which I do think is a legitimate argument, which could be solved by, immigration. But if you are a Christian nationalist or if you are far right and you don't like immigration, well, then you're not gonna want that. You're gonna want to essentially go beyond encouraging people to have kids, right? Essentially create a system where people are coerced into having children that they might not feel prepared to have, might not wanna have. And look, there are certain parts of our policy in the United States that attempt at least to incentivize having children, right? Certain tax breaks, tax credits, things like that. But I would argue that if you want the birth rate to increase in America, one of the best ways to do that is create an economic situation in which couples feel secure enough to bring children into the world. You get what I'm saying?
Look, I don't know if people are gonna think that this position is controversial, but I don't give a goddamn if you have kids or don't.
I agree.
Okay,
I think it's weird to be obsessed with that issue.
Yeah, and I don't care from a policy perspective either. Oh, what about how it affects the economy or how it affects climate change? Brother, you shouldn't have a child in your life that you have to take care of for 18 years because you're worried, or not have one, because you're worried about climate change or macroeconomic policies. Trust me, the minute you have a kid, those are gonna be the least of your concerns, okay? So this is going to affect your life massively. Do not listen to a politician on either side about a deeply personal decision, which leads me to my #1 issue with JD Vance and the right wing on this, which is, can you please mind your own goddamn business? Like, what are you doing? I thought you wanted the government to get out of our lives. Now, all of a sudden, big government's like, oh, okay, you don't use that kind of contraception, but if you didn't and you got pregnant, now the state owns your body for 9 months and the state government will tell you what to do, and the jackbooted thugs will get between you and your doctor. And by the way, we need you having more kids, so go out there and have sex, but don't do it within marriage, do it in missionary position, don't do it with a guy, don't do it with this. Shut up and leave us alone.
By the way, I hate to say it, but I'm gonna say it, and this is probably gonna get a lot of backlash. I've seen a lot of miserable people in America, and a lot of them are miserable because they're stressed out of their minds due to the fact that they have kids.
Yeah,
okay,
of course.
They're trying to get their kid into a better school through, a lottery system. The public schools in their neighborhoods are falling apart. They don't have enough money to put food on the table. They don't know if their kids are gonna be able to get into college. If they do get into college, they don't know if their kids are gonna be able to, pay for it through working. Of course, they're not. They don't want their kids to take out loans, so they want to see if they can pay for it. Like, it's just so stressful. My brother has 4 kids. He's stressed. He loves his children. I love his children. I'm glad he had the children. I didn't have the children, right? Stressed out of his mind.
Yeah. So
okay,
guys,
so you want to talk about miserable? You really want to talk about miserable, okay? Having children in America is one of the most challenging things to do because there's no real support system here.
Yeah, so this is why Fox News and the right wing have been going nuts about the culture wars for decades now, because they're losing the culture wars. In the old ways, what the culture was is society would program you. They would put this software in your head, which was a set of things, and some of them were great. Respect your elders, eat with a fork and knife. Not all cultural software is bad. And if it comes from traditions, some of the traditions are terrific, right? But some of the traditions are totally outdated. So they would tell you things like, you gotta get married, and you have to have kids, and as many kids as possible. And so eventually people were like, well, I thought we believed in freedom. So maybe somebody wants to have a lot of kids, and maybe somebody doesn't want to have any kids. Maybe we should let them make up their own minds. And the right wing that are traditionalists flipped out about that. And they're like, no, tradition. I want you to have that software in your head, and I want to make sure the government enforces it, and you're not allowed to have your own thoughts, okay? We're gonna tell you whether to have kids and how many kids to have. That's absurd. For some people, they love kids, like me. I had 2 kids, I'm thrilled, I couldn't be happier, right? Some people I've seen have kids, not so thrilled, right? It depends, brothers and sisters. Have any of these politicians ever lived a life? Have you never run across someone who didn't have kids and was ecstatic? Who didn't have kids and was miserable? Had kids ecstatic, had kids miserable? Because there's a giant range of us. Why don't you let us live our lives and just live your own life and stop trying to oppress us with a government that tells us how to live? That's supposed to be the exact opposite of right-wing ideology. So get your house in order and figure out, are you for freedom or are you not? Are you for big government and government tyranny or are you not?
And finally, we've had multiple conversations about this very topic, and I feel that we've dropped the ball in defending the cat community. Okay, cats are adorable, they are innocent, leave them alone. We gotta go to break, we'll be right back with more news.
Back on TYT, Super Chat, Eric says, love Cenk and Anna, but this is just for Bart. Con! Bart, I thought that was a good one too. I had to explain the reference to Anna. All right, Bruce City Mike in the YouTube member section says, how can any American see that record, referring to Tim Walz, and not want those policies across the nation to improve the lives of themselves and their family and friends? Look, that's such a great point, because that's another reason I want Tim Walz as the VP nominee, again, him or Josh Shapiro. Because at least then people would look at those policies and go, well, that doesn't sound radical left to me. That sounds like exactly what I want. That sounds super moderate. And hey, wait, why aren't we doing that nationally? Yeah. Ice Cold Beverage says, my guy, Cenk, bringing that airport rage today.
For real.
That's funny, Ice Cold, that's funny. Todd Fulmer disagrees, I think. Why does your audience care about what happens to Hamas or Hezbollah? Why is this your lead/constant story? This doesn't matter to the average working American trying to raise a family. Well, it does when they take $26 billion out of your pocket 100%. And send it over to Israel, who's got paid family leave, universal health care, a balanced budget, Iron Dome.
Also, as we're aiding and abetting the slaughter of innocent people in the Middle East, that leads to hostility toward the men and women in our armed services. So that's another issue, but go ahead if you don't care about it, but we're gonna keep talking about it.
The Progressive Moose says, thank you, TYT, and everyone in front and behind the cameras for keeping things real and breaking down the facts and giving us the most honest news available in the West. I love from Canada. Thank you so much. Athena Onken says, thanks for your honest, if not always comfortable coverage of the news. All the shows are great. You help keep me sane. Look, I'm calling folks who donate, especially over $100 through tyt.com/team. And that is the #1 comment I hear most often. Thank you for keeping me sane. Because there's so much gaslighting going on, both in mainstream media and right-wing media. So, we appreciate that we built this community of sanity here at TYT, and we love the members for that. Quincy Magoo says, Bibi never met a conflict he didn't want to get into. Well, that is throughout his career, very true. Here's another disagreement. Sam Show 20 says on Twitch, I rarely disagree with Cenk, although I'm not thrilled about Harris. I think America's ready to embrace her. Unless she runs a stupid campaign, I just see her numbers going up and Trump's continuing to drop. Well, look, I hope you're right. But I'm just telling you, like, that's not usually how things go. So don't get too disappointed if there's bumps in the road.
Right.
And if it goes down, don't panic, because a lot of times it'll come back up. I just don't want you guys getting like your emotions invested in these wild swings. Let's keep a steady head, okay? And Lady J323 and Metal Turtle 531, thank you for gifting subs on Twitch. Organic Panic says, a friend of mine who admitted she doesn't follow politics and doesn't vote said this, since Harris is on the ballot, she will be sure to get herself to the polls and vote for her. See, that's awesome, and that's a huge upside of picking Kamala Harris, because people are like, oh my God, it's someone new, and not the same old 98-year-olds, and that's an enormous thing. Progressive Pipes Plus said, Cenk, I've always been confused about the Middle East conflicts in my life. You and TYT family are the first and only media outlet that has taken the time to explain. Keep up the great work. Thank you. We appreciate that. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Ravenstar 1980, KQQ Jr., thank you guys. They joined through tyt.com/team, makes a big difference for us. And then on YouTube, we appreciate everyone who's been gifting throughout the show and joining as well. The join button's below. Anna.
All right, well, let's stay on the topic of JD Vance because the Veep concerns continue.
JD Vance is the vice presidential nominee for President Trump. Now, if you had a time machine, if you go back 2 weeks, would he have picked JD Vance again? I doubt it. And JD is super smart. He also has a long history of public commentary.
You will not believe the Democratic lawmaker who actually agrees with Ben Shapiro on this. We're gonna get to him in just a moment. But before we do, why don't we listen to Shapiro elaborate further on JD Vance and how Trump might have buyer's remorse.
I think he probably would have picked somebody like Glenn Youngkin from Virginia in an attempt to broaden out his base. Instead, he went with JD Vance, feeling, because he was right, that at the time he had a very solid advantage in the race against Joe Biden. I agree that our country has moved away from caring about the future because too few Americans care about having children. I totally agree with that. However, this description that JD Vance is using, is that politically smart or is it politically damaging? Now, again, he doesn't have a time machine. He can't go back and undo something he said now 3.5 years ago. With that said, Democrats are, of course, using this as a club with which to beat Donald Trump and JD Vance. They're trying to run up the gender gap. So one of the things to understand about this election cycle is that the gender gap is larger than it has ever been in the history of American politics in all likelihood. Males overwhelmingly vote for Trump. Females, particularly single females, overwhelmingly vote for Biden. And so they're going to try to find some sort of wedge to claim that all Republicans are sexist. And this is the wedge they're using today.
It seems to be working really well, if that's the wedge that they're using. And look, I mean, I will say this, Cenk. Kamala Harris, so far in her campaigning, has done a good job in focusing on that wedge issue, labeling JD Vance and the Republican ticket as weird rather than hyper focusing on threat to democracy, which clearly was not effective messaging. It did not help Biden much in the election. And so now you have Democrats kind of lining up to mock the Republican ticket, make fun of them, call them weird. as opposed to constantly fear-mongering about the Republican ticket. So there were definitely portions of what Shapiro was saying there that I definitely agree with.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that JD Vance is definitely going in the wrong direction for Republicans, and it's interesting to see Republicans acknowledging that and realizing that, because you're doubling down on something that was already unpopular. When I say unpopular, the number one problem we have in this country and everywhere is not just as it pertains to politics, but it's particularly true in politics, is that it's the hardest thing in the world is to escape your own perspective. So when I say Trump is unpopular, or the idea that you should be forced into having more children, otherwise your rights should be taken away, is unpopular, a lot of people who believe that are like, no way. Everyone I know thinks you gotta have more babies. And MAGA is awesome, and everyone I know is MAGA. But guys, I'm gonna tell you the same thing I told Blue MAGA earlier, when they were pretending that Joe Biden was young and dynamic. Yeah, you can think that all day long, but that's not the question. The question is, what do a majority of Americans believe? And a majority of Americans believe we should make the choices on whether we have kids, how many kids we have, and then you should take a long walk off a short dock, because we don't give a damn what you think about our personal lives. And that also applies to whether we should use contraception, who we should sleep with, who we should get married with. Oh, do I have to ask JD Vance's permission before I go on a date with someone? And and which clothes did you wear? And are you in, which, on and on and on, okay? The right wing is going back to the moralizing, annoying party that it has been for most of my life.
Yeah, it's a good
They
point.
had a little brief honeymoon where they rhetorically talked a lot about freedom. And I said, look, I don't think they mean it. And here we are, they didn't mean it. Freedom to them meant, well, I want to be able to say inappropriate things and get away with it. Okay, but that's not all of freedom. You know, how many kids you want to have is a giant part of freedom. Whether you can control your own body or not is a giant part of freedom. And
Can
so,
we have both freedoms?
yeah, can we have all of the freedoms?
Yeah.
Right? Can we be disciplined and principled and consistent? And so usually the case for politicians is no. But in this case, back to the main issue, this whole JD Vance, I'm gonna tell you how to live your life and you need to have more kids. That dog ain't gonna hunt. That is a terrible, anti-freedom, annoying message that Americans do not want to hear, even if they have plenty of kids, let alone the people without kids. They're gonna hate you for life because you're judging them and shaming them when you have no business doing that.
Now, there have been a lot of questions about whether Donald Trump has come to the realization that JD Vance is a terrible VP pick, whether he has buyer's remorse. And in interview after interview, when he's been asked that question, he has remained consistent in defending JD Vance and arguing that he's a great VP pick. In fact, he just had an interview with Laura Ingraham, and Aaron Rupar is tweeting out about it because it aired as we were doing the show, I guess. And so Ingraham asked Donald Trump, what can you say to viewers to reassure them that JD Vance was an excellent pick? Donald Trump responded with, he's got tremendous support, and he really does among a certain group of people like families. He made a statement having to do with families. That was a verbatim quote from Trump.
Of course it was. That sounds totally like Trump.
Yeah, okay, but Ben Shapiro still seems optimistic about Trump winning another term in office. So let's hear his argument there.
So this is why I say Republicans are gonna have to be significantly more careful about what they say against Kamala Harris than they have been against Joe Biden. Not because Kamala is wonderful or decent or anything like that, but because the media are waiting. They're waiting. Do not play their game. Just do not play their game. Donald Trump still has the advantage in this election. He does. He has the advantage in this election. It just requires the president of the United States, Donald Trump, former president, to be very meticulous about what he says. And the same is true for JD Vance. I have some faith that they will. Again, I think that both are intelligent men, particularly JD.
Well, I mean, real quick though, he is right that even now, Trump still has the advantage and Kamala Harris is the underdog in this race. He is right about that. Can Trump increase his lead over Harris? I don't know, especially with JD Vance fumbling over and over again in press interviews.
Did I hear that right? That he said Trump and Vance are both bright guys, especially JD Vance. Because he knows he couldn't help himself. He can't stomach saying that Trump is intelligent because he knows he ain't. Okay.
You're right.
Okay, so anyways, by the way, that's why I dislike JD Vance more, because I know that brother knows that this is BS, and he was pretending to be a liberal a minute ago and calling Trump Hitler and all that, and talking up his identity politics on how he's a poor hillbilly and all that stuff, right? So now all of a sudden you're massively conservative? No, you're perfectly bright. You just have no moral core. But agreeing with Ben Shapiro, should Republicans resist attacking her on race and gender? Of course, it'll backfire. Because once you attack her on gender, first of all, that's 51% of the voters. So that's just the dumbest thing you could do. But as I've told you already many times, they won't be able to help themselves because that's who they are. I'm talking about the leaders, I'm not talking about the voters, okay? Media figures, politicians, etc. And then on race, you're gonna wash away gains that you made with African Americans when you attack her on race. Now, I will say though, again, what no other show will say. On the other hand, Democrats and Kamala Harris should not make the mistake of going around saying, you have to vote for her because she's a black woman. That would be a giant mistake because that also turns people off.
It does, yeah.
I have to vote for her because of she's a certain race and gender? No, I don't. So the Democrats should not do identity politics. They should let the Republicans do their toxic form of identity politics and take the win. Will they be able to resist? I don't know. I already see groups like white men for Harris, white women
white
for Harris.
For Harris.
Like, what are we doing, guys?
But like,
it's okay to be for Kamala Harris without stating your race. Do I have to do Turks who are not Turkish citizens, Muslims who are now atheists for Harris? Just be for Harris without doing weirdo stuff like that. It doesn't help.
Yeah, and it's also about the messaging within those groups, right? Like, I was a little critical of those groups and then I got pushed back. Oh, well, you should listen to the conversations, like the substantive conversations that are happening. But typically, especially in that white women for Harris group, the conversations are white women bad, white women like destroy country, use your privilege to promote Harris. Like that's gonna turn women off.
Yeah, not helpful.
Like, don't do that.
Not
don't
helpful.
do that. Okay.
Yeah, like this, any shaming of our private lives and opinions is bad politics.
Yes, I agree.
So when Democrats go, you don't know how to handle Kamala Harris's sorority that she went to at Howard University, which is mainly a black sorority.
Do not wear pearls, okay?
Okay, don't do this and don't do that and don't interrupt their dancing. How dare you not know? How the hell are we supposed to know what a black sorority does and doesn't do?
Look,
when you shame people for things they couldn't possibly know, you're just turning them off. Leave it alone. The Republicans will do your job for you.
You put it perfectly, right? We see how the toxic identity politics and culture war messaging from the Trump ticket is sinking the Trump ticket. Democrats should heed that warning and not engage in it with like the Democrat flavor of culture war, identity politics stuff.
Just like the Republicans can't help themselves, I guarantee you the Democrats will not be able to help themselves.
Let's cross our fingers and hope that they can. Okay, but for now, I want to get back to the Democratic lawmaker who seems to agree with Ben Shapiro on Trump potentially having some buyer's remorse on JD Vance. And that individual is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Take a look.
The addition of JD Vance to this ticket, it's incredibly bad choice. I think Donald Trump, I know him, and he's probably sitting and watching the TV, and every day it comes out Vance has done something more extreme, more weird, more erratic. Vance seems to be more erratic and more extreme than President Trump, and I'll bet President Trump is sitting there scratching his head and wondering, why did I pick this guy? The choice may be one of the best things he ever did for Democrats.
And Schumer even went so far as to make a pretty bold prediction that I don't think is that crazy. So let's take a look.
The president has about 10 days before the Ohio ballot is locked in, and he has a choice. Does he keep Vance on the ticket, where he already has a whole lot of baggage? He's probably going to be more baggage over the weeks because we'll hear more things about him. Or does he pick someone new? It's his choice.
So what do you think about that, Cenk? Do you think that he might switch Vance out for someone else?
I don't know, but I do know that it's smart politics to open this debate up, because the Republicans lose no matter which side of the question you're on. Should he dump JD Vance or not? Already we're having a conversation about how awful JD Vance is and how hurt the Trump ticket is and how they should react to that. So that is a great conversation for Democrats to have. So nicely played by Chuck Schumer there. It's not true that they have to decide by August 7th because the Ohio ballot measure, that's a thing that was an issue earlier. Ohio fixed it. Democrats are still pretending it's an issue so they could do a virtual roll call on August 7th. I just want to be clear about the facts. Schumer is not correct about that. The other thing about Schumer is these are all good points, but he's among the 200-year-olds that run Washington, so you could lose that point in an otherwise incredibly mundane presentation.
I agree.
That is why when Kamala Harris makes a good speech, or Tim Walz is great on TV, or Josh Shapiro / Barack Obama gives a speech, Democrats and independents are like, whoa, look at that. Someone who can make an effective point in a way that's engaging. That's amazing, right? So let's get that new talent in, keep them going, keep them going. So Schumer, good job on the strategy. Everything else, let's get some young blood in there.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, in our bonus episode, we have a fun senator making an appearance and getting scolded by a Fox News host. So it's a conservative lawmaker getting scolded by right-wing Fox News, which
that
is so
super,
good.
Super interesting. Hit the join button below if you're on YouTube to join us so you could get that bonus episode. Everyone else, tyt.com/team. And one last thing, be careful about the word weird. Tim Walz came up with it. I love it. I like being aggressive, but don't let it become the synonym for Christian or just white right-wingers, etc. I'm a little afraid of that. Just something to look out for. Keep it exactly as it is now. Don't go any further with it. We'll be right back.